Hi guys, this is Weasel making a strategy video for iPoker VIP. Today we are going to be considering the concept of 3-bet bluffs. So why do we want to 3-bet bluff? Well, it's a good way to boost your win rate. We can use it to create an aggressive image if that is something we wanted to do. We may find it easier to get paid off in 3-bet pots when we do pick up a hand. It's low variance, and this may seem strange. You may perhaps not associate 3-betting with being a low variance strategy. However, as we will go on to see, there is no need to c-bet after an unsuccessful 3-bet bluff attempt. In actual fact, a lot of the variance associated with 3-betting largely involves when you are 3-betting for value, and when you are 3-betting for value you may need to fire multiple barrels in certain situations. Of course, we can still fire multiple barrels in certain spots when we are 3-bet bluffing also, but it should be profitable in most cases without ever needing to c-bet the flop. So in itself, 3-bet bluffing can actually be a low variance strategy. Who do we want to target? Well, we want to target players with a high fold to 3-bet stat. So a high fold to 3-bet stat is really anything above 70%. If you do find a player who is folding to 3-bets 80% of the time or more, these are very good targets to 3-bet very wide. In fact, someone who folds 80% or more of the time to a 3-bet, it will likely be profitable to 3-bet them with any two cards. We want to target players with a high ATS, a high attempt to steal, and a high ATS is anything that is higher than that player's pre-flop raise stat, more or less. For example, an ATS of 30 or maybe even 40 from the button or from the cutoff is a very high ATS, and it's just going to be less possible for players with a high ATS to play back successfully against our 3-bets, just because they will have a wide opening range and will find it harder to defend that wide range. We want to 3-bet bluff in position more often, and you may wonder, why does it matter whether we are in position or out of position if we are just looking to take the pot down pre-flop? It's simply to do with fold equity. Villain is less likely to fold in position. If you 3-bet from the blinds, for example, and villain is on the button, he is probably more likely to call in position with a hand he might fold out of position, because he thinks he is going to find some opportunities post flop to maybe float, or maybe and take the pot down on the turn, or maybe to raise some flops or raise some turns. So even if you don't plan on playing post flop after you 3-bet bluff, you will find that you have more fold equity when you 3-bet someone against whom you have position. And again, I point out that there is in fact no need to c-bet. If you think about two of the things I've said, in particular that we are targeting players with a high fold to 3-bet, if that player is folding to 3-bets 80% of the time or more, and then he does decide to call your 3-bet bluff, his range is likely going to be very strong because he folds a lot to 3-bets, so you can perhaps expect him to show up with either some strong broadways or some strong high pocket pairs, such as maybe pocket 10s plus. And these type of hands, it's unlikely he is going to be folding to 1-bet anyway. If you think perhaps, for example, about an ace high dry board, either villain has a hand like ace king, which he's definitely not folding to 1-bet, or villain can have a hand like pocket jacks, which it's still very likely that even on an ace high dry board he is going to be floating you if he expects you to be c-betting that board. So when someone with a high fold to 3-bet does decide to call your 3-bet, they are usually going to be much less profitable targets for a c-bet. You are going to find that you need to double barrel very often in order to get them to fold. They aren't going to be folding much to 1-bet. However, if they are folding a lot to 3-bets, then as we're going to see, it should actually be profitable in itself just to 3-bet them as a bluff. What kind of hands do we want to be 3-bet bluffing with? We want to 3-bet the top of our range of hands that is not strong enough to call. This can include hands like suited aces, suited kings, perhaps some suited 1-gappers, 9-7 suited, 10-8 suited, 6-8 suited, suited 2-gappers, small pockets, and I've put here if you can't set mine profitably, otherwise you should be calling. And this pretty much goes for most hands, especially if villain is a good target for a 3-bet bluff. If villain is folding a ton to 3-bets and you find yourself in position with a hand like Queen King offsuit, there's never going to be any point in 3-betting that hand for value, because you know that villain is pretty much never going to continue with anything worse than that hand. So if a hand is strong enough to call, you shouldn't be 3-betting that hand in general. And it's much better to pick hands which aren't quite strong enough to call but still have potential, such as suited hands, maybe hands with 1 high card. And here I have put trash as well. Obviously you don't want to be going crazy with your 3-bets, but the main point is that against certain players it is going to be profitable to 3-bet any 2 in certain spots, so long as you don't go crazy. And the only time you'd really choose to 3-bet trash hands instead of something like 10-7 suited or Jack-8 suited is because you are card dead. Otherwise you might as well fold the 7 deuce off and wait for something that at least looks remotely playable. Positional awareness. Your 3-bet will be interpreted as stronger or weaker depending on the positions involved. I've made a brief list of some of the positions, starting with the positions where your 3-bet will be interpreted as the lightest, because these are standard spots for people to 3-bet bluff. And the same goes if you are the pre-flop opener. It is useful to be aware of which situations you can expect players to 3-bet you light. And the most standard spots to 3-bet light are particularly button versus cutoff, because button has position on the cutoff, but also small blind versus button and big blind versus button. And the reason these are traditional spots to steal is because the button's open raising range is typically quite light and therefore can't stand up to much heat and will be folding a lot to 3-bets. We get onto some positions which are interpreted as slightly stronger, but still pretty standard spots to 3-bet bluff. Small blind versus cutoff, big blind versus cutoff. These are slightly stronger than button versus cutoff because small blind and big blind are out of position, but it's still expected that people opening from the cutoff are going to be opening quite light. We now get on to some of the 3-bet bluffs which look stronger. Button versus MP, cutoff versus MP, small blind versus MP, big blind versus MP. And typically we expect people's MP opening range to be quite a bit tighter than their cutoff opening range. So therefore, when someone does 3-bet against these ranges, it's typically going to be interpreted as stronger. And finally, we have the 3-bets which look very strong, and these are 3-bets against an under the gun open. The key to using this information is to know who you are bluffing against. For example, if a fish opens from under the gun and you think he is perhaps somewhat positionally aware, so he is opening stronger ranges under the gun than he is opening on the button, it's probably not a good idea to 3-bet bluff against his under the gun opening range, because he is probably not going to be folding a hand. However, if a good regular opens under the gun, these then become good bluff spots to 3-bet bluff, because the regular might expect you to realize his under the gun opening range is stronger, and therefore to only be 3-betting against him with an even stronger range, and therefore this good regular may even give you more credit for 3-betting in a situation where it wouldn't normally be a good idea to 3-bet as a bluff. So the key is to know who you are bluffing against. Against good regulars, it can be a good leveling spot to 3-bet bluff against under the gun and MP opens. Against a fish who may be opening still slightly tighter under the gun and MP, it's not such a good idea to 3-bet bluff, because they are quite possibly not going to be folding a slightly stronger range that they are opening from under the gun or MP. Okay, let's look at some of the maths surrounding 3-bet bluffs. Firstly, our 3-bet sizing, and the recommendation is somewhere between 2.8x and 3.5x. The sizing is important because we don't want to give villain the odds to continue with a wide part of his range. This would defeat the object of 3-bet bluffing in the first place. But we also don't want to bet so large that we open ourselves up to being exploited, either because villain begins 4-bet bluffing us, or we don't want to lose too much money when we run into villain's value range. If you size your 3-bets somewhere between these two sizes, you shouldn't go far wrong. Our squeeze size perhaps should be a little bigger, roughly 3x plus 1x per caller. For example, if the cutoff open raises to 3 big blinds, the button flats, and we are in the blinds and want to squeeze. Firstly, we make it 3x, so that would be 9 big blinds, plus an extra 1x for the button call. Therefore, our squeeze size would total 12 big blinds in this case. How do we know if our 3-bet is going to be profitable? In other words, how often will our 3-bet need to work in order for us to show a profit in the long run? Let's consider an example. The small blind raises to 3 big blinds, and Hero, who is in the big blind, 3-bet bluffs to 9 big blinds. Let's assume Hero is not going to c-bet if he's called. We just want to know how often Hero needs to take it down for this to be profitable in the long run. Firstly, what is our risk to reward ratio? Well, Hero is risking 8 big blinds to win 4 big blinds. He's only risking 8 big blinds because he's already paid a mandatory 1 big blind, so we don't count this. We do, however, count it as part of the potential money he can win. So he's risking 8 big blinds to win 4 big blinds, and that 4 big blinds includes the big blind he has paid as a mandatory bet, and add to that the 3 big blinds that the small blind has open raised. So overall, he's risking 8 big blinds to win 4 big blinds. The total pot is 12 big blinds, 8 of which Hero has invested with his 3-bet bluff. And a very useful and straightforward formula is that the amount of the total pot Hero has invested as percentage is the equity that Hero needs In this case, we are talking specifically about fold equity. Therefore, if hero is investing 2/3 of the pot, or 66.666% of the pot, he needs to win the pot that amount of the time in order to break even in the long run. So in this particular case, with the chips involved, hero needs to take this pot down 66.66% of the time to break even. If villain does have a fold to 3-bet stat of 67% or higher, then hero's play is going to be plus EV, and that's even if he never c-bets. So a lot of the time when planning a 3-bet strategy, you don't need to be too concerned about what you're going to do post-flop necessarily. If you think the opportunity is going to be plus EV pre-flop, then you can take that opportunity, 3-bet bluff, and if it doesn't work, then you can just give up in the knowledge that the 3-bet attempt was profitable. So a few final pointers. Don't go crazy. If you start making it too obvious that you are 3-betting light, people are going to play back at you. And sometimes this might be okay if you are then going to successfully exploit the dynamic you've created. For example, if you can anticipate someone is going to 4-bet light, you can maybe start jamming over the top. But assuming you don't want people to realize what you're doing, it's probably a good idea if you don't go crazy. You may find you end up spewing also, maybe even sending yourself on tilt. Often it works better with a tight image. So if villain is expecting you to only be 3-betting queens plus or some strong broadways, obviously he is going to give you more credit when you decide to 3-bet light. And the final point is pretty much what I've been saying, and it's don't slay the golden goose. And the golden goose, perhaps you've heard the tale. Briefly, I think it's about 3 brothers who come across this golden goose somehow, and every day this golden goose lays an egg, and they pretty much have an unlimited source of income until they decide to get greedy, and they think to themselves, well, if we kill this golden goose, we can have all the gold that's in the goose right now. And I think the story goes is they kill the goose and they realize that inside the goose there was nothing, and they deprive themselves of the chance to have this golden egg every day. And it's pretty much the same with 3-bet bluffing. If you can fly just below the radar and just throw in a 3-bet bluff against unsuspecting opponents every now and again, but not quite enough that they realize that you are exploiting them, then you perhaps have an unlimited source of extra EV that you can just keep stealing a little bit of their money every now and again. Whereas if you go crazy, you are going to end up slaying the golden goose, in that villain is going to realize that you are trying to steal his money from him, and he will adjust, and you will have ruined your chance to continue 3-betting against him light. So that's it for 3-bet bluffing. I hope it's given you some idea on how you can perhaps work this into your game. Thanks for watching. This has been Weasel for iPoker VIP.